Good afternoon. I'm just making short little videos, things that I think about. And recently, I thought about my identity, and I had to really think about it. Like, it didn't occur to me right off the bat that my identity is kind of blurry. And so I realized how much it has changed throughout my life. So as a kid, my identity was probably a little bit rebellious and, a kid from a broken home. And, my parents were divorced, and maybe that is an identity I put on myself. And then as a young adult, my identity was probably a wild partier, just crazy and unruly, very pig-headed and stubborn. And that was probably how I would have identified if anybody knew me or asked any questions about it. Then when I got married, my identity changed. I was a wife, and I was a mother, and that remained my identity for a long time. I had my children, and I was mom. My identity was in my children. And then after my third child was born, I accepted Jesus. And my identity kind of morphed a little bit. I was now a Christian, but I didn't make that my identity. I was still a mom, a very, I'm not going to say I was a perfectionist because I wasn't. I was very kind of kicked back, I guess. But I did identify through my children, through their successes, through their lives, through their friends. They all took on theater, and so I got my identity through that as a costumer and a theater mom, and my identity was always linked to my children. And then now my kids are older. My older three are off adulting, and the youngest are teenagers and very much independent and trying to do their own thing. And so my identity has changed again, and I've left the area where I was a costumer and working with the theaters that my kids were involved in. And that was a huge part of my identity for years, like 20 years, I was a costumer. And if people asked me what I did, that was my answer. I was a costumer. And so now I've moved far away, no theaters and no outlet for costumes. And I recently gave up pretty much the last of my costumes that I was holding on to and just gave them away. And my identity left with them. And then I was just kind of in limbo. I'm like, what am I? Who am I? And so now I'm like, who am I? Like, what is my purpose? What am I here for? And then I realized it's always been there. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. That's my identity. And that's been there since I accepted Christ, but it was always on the back burner. I had all these other things in my life that were more important, that I put more value on than my identity in Christ. But now that I'm older and I'm not preoccupied with my idols and my hobbies and stuff that literally consumed my days, I spend all my days now just listening to sermons and podcasts and different things. And my identity is in Jesus. And that's okay. That's my identity now. But I've taken it one step further. And I'm going to say it. My identity in Christ is I'm a watchman. And that's a fringe group, but I've always kind of been that way. So it would make sense that I keep going. So the watchmen are people that watch the times and the seasons for the second coming of Jesus. And so I'm identifying now as a watchman. And that's the first time I've said it out loud, but it feels good because that is who I am. I listen to so many things about what's going on in the world. And right now, the signs are off the chains. I could do little videos every day, a couple minutes, about the biggest things, but the most notable right now is it's Israel's birthday coming up very soon, like within the next couple weeks. They're going to be 78 years old as a nation. They were born overnight. And the Bible has prophecies about that, about a nation being born overnight. And it was Israel, because they were a country, and then they were dissolved. They scattered across the world, and then they got back their statehood, and they became a country again in, I believe it was 1948. So it is their 78th birthday. And there's also another Bible passage in Matthew that says the generation in the end times, this generation will not pass away before the second coming of man. And I believe those are connected. And a generation in the Bible is, 75 to 85 years if you're doing well. So if Israel's 78, we're in the last days. And that's like the number one thing. So as a watchman, that's my tidbit for today. Why I believe we're in the last days is Israel's 78th birthday, and at most we could have a few years because that generation's getting ready to pass away. And he's coming back before that happens. So that's it. My identity in Christ, I'm a watchman.